OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
8 minutes past 9 this morning. Eoin, once again, you've not included us on the email list for screeners for HBO documentaries, but you've got it.
Yeah, they obviously just pick and choose who they give these things to these days. So sorry about that, guys. Nathan, you saw part 1. I don't think you've joined us in part 2 just yet.
Well, trust me, Ger, from the email that Eoin Sheahan sent me on last night and some of the little pop-ups that came up on my screen, you're better off not being on that email list.
So Tiger Woods part 2.
It's for work. It's for work. I swear, it's for work.
Well, I think it's that I was trying to open it on my work computer is why I couldn't watch it. Wherever you get your kicks on. It's lockdown. I know it's tough for young lads.
Really is a lot of pent-up frustration. Speaking of Tiger Woods part 2, it was
no pent-up frustration apparently part 2.
No, not so much. I think part 1 is better for people who've seen both. I think part 1 is probably a little bit more revealing. Part 2, as we mentioned last week, focuses on the downfall of Tiger, so 2008 onwards. And I think everybody kind of knows all these details, which is kind of the problem. If you're making a documentary about one of the most public downfalls in sporting history, it's going to be very hard to give the public something that they don't already know. Like, they speak to Rachel Lucatel and she's one of the talking heads in it, and she gives a good bit of insight, but outside of that, it's a lot of archive, it's a lot of images of magazine fronts, newspaper front covers, all that sort of thing. So you're not actually gaining a whole pile, but from Rachel Lucatel you can definitely get a bit about what Tiger's mindset was like in those years when he had so many extramarital affairs going on, and the way he, I guess, was so psychopathic about it that he managed to compartmentalize all these sort of things. He would make these women think that he loved them properly and that they were the only one. And I think the sense of shock that they felt when they all realized that there were so many people that he was sleeping with so regularly before this all came out, I think is one of the things you can certainly take away from it. I'm not sure how this is covered in the book, Nathan, but certainly I think that's the big part about this, the ability for Tiger Woods to compartmentalise, for him to zone in on the course and for him to completely let loose off the course during that period of time is probably most interesting here.
Yeah, it was as if he was leading, and he was leading a completely alternative life for several years. He had been built up to be this American dream, and I think for anybody outside the very close golf circle, they believed it. They looked at the happy marriage, they looked at the beautiful kids, and they thought this guy is everything you would want in a sports star, in an inspiring figure. And it was quite shocking as they went through woman by woman, the various different affairs he had. And what was most shocking, I guess, was that how seedy it all ended up being. That and the sheer number. And the reviews I read of part 2 again is that it is very salacious and overly so, and quite down on Tiger. We know that he made big mistakes. Morally, he made big mistakes. But even watching back and reading about some of the footage of the time and the reaction, like the chairman of Augusta National standing up at a press conference and slating Tiger and going to town on him because of having affairs, as much as you can frown upon it. Like, what is it to do with him? But it was open season for a good 18 months on Tiger Woods to take him down in whatever way you want, despite the fact that Tiger was the one who built up so many of these people into the position of power they were in.
As a matter of interest, how would it not have been seedy? Would he, like, they classier hotels, limos? What would have made it stopped it from being seedy? Because, like, it's a fundamentally seedy thing, no?
It is, but I suppose it was the sheer magnitude of people involved, right, which meant that it wasn't just one or two, and as you say, always in high-class hotels. It was in the sort of motel-style side of the road.
Right. Knee tremblers.
That you would have assumed, wrongly, and maybe it's my own prejudice looking at it, that you would think the world's greatest sports person, the world's richest sports person, wouldn't have been resorting to. But it seemed it was any way possible at that stage.
Right.
Yeah.
The scale of it makes it sound like it's a doping program almost, that so many people had to be involved for this, Owen. What unfolds?
But almost like that. That's actually a really interesting analogy. The sheer numbers, I guess, is one of the seedy elements of this. But I would definitely say that the seediness of it, and if you look back on it regretfully from the standpoint maybe of the media, is the way in which some of these women were actually spoken about. Like, there's a clip of Whoopi Goldberg on a chat show in the USA tearing into Rachel Lukatell, and it's kind of disgusting, really, the way all these people are spoken about. Like, obviously, Tiger is torn limb from limb across a multitude of different platforms, and it really does culminate in that Billy Payne, I guess, monologue at Augusta National that you mentioned there, Nathan, which is also kind of disgusting, I think. The way he talks about Tiger as a role model and questions his personal decisions and how he has let everybody down at Augusta National, which I just think is almost the worst part of the story. Like that he would have the temerity to go out there and the neck to actually say that about Tiger when he had already been down and he had been beaten multiple times by everybody in the media come that stage of his life. And it just felt, there was just such a dark undertone to that Billy Payne speech at Augusta National. And in fairness, the documentary does hit back at that. And there is one talking head in the documentary who's like, who are you to say that about Tiger Woods? And I guess there was the apology, the press conference, the infamous press conference at this point. There was a lot of self-reflection going on. And I don't know, I think that there was a balancing act there where it got to the point where the reaction to Tiger Woods had spilled over to seediness in itself.
Yeah, well, I think it became clear there was no low that the tabloids in America wouldn't go to, whether it was ripping apart Tiger Woods bit by bit to destroy his character, to make sure that it was going to be, at the time it seemed virtually impossible for him to bring his life back together, of that public humiliation, which even now you go back and watch that press conference and think, was it necessary? That maybe his family wanted it, but it did seem to bring, again, just totally unnecessary attention to what was happening, that he had to stand there humiliated in front of the world, apologising to his mother, sat in the front row.
It's so mad. I presume the sponsors wanted some kind of public retribution, atonement, and the agents were like, look, we're going to try and make money off you for the rest of your life. If we're going to do that, you're going to have the process of rehabilitation must begin somewhere. And it was so cack-handed. Obviously, Maria Sharapova's almost completely copied variation of it a couple of years later is interesting to kind of compare these two side by side. But Americans don't really care. After about 18 months, they're like, what was it? You were famous for some reason again. What was it? I can't remember.
And the way in which Eoin is chased as well for months and months afterwards is pretty horrible too. It's a good reminder of what exactly the whole circus was, and how incredible. I think a lot of these things are maybe just hammered home a little bit because we're in the middle of a pandemic as well, and you're like, oh my God, all these people outside the apartments everywhere you go. I don't know. I think there's certainly a lot of questions to be asked about that period of time and how Tiger and Eoin were both covered. You could say that Tiger had it coming, but after a period of time, you're kind of like, this guy's sort of paid his dues. He has apologized and apologized and apologized. Everything has been written. Everybody he's been sleeping with have been written about, and maybe they need to be left alone a little bit more. That's certainly my takeaway from it. There is a bit of golf in episode 2 as well, and it's about the injury and the injuries and the downfall after Torrey Pines and winning that US Open, and obviously the DUI then in 2017, and those intervening 10 years or so. But the one thing that I found very interesting, and again, this is just archive, it's nothing new, is him talking to Scott Van Pelt. And Scott Van Pelt is like, you want to get 100 career wins, or do you want to get to 19 majors? And he's like, 19. And he's like, all right, let me give you another question. If you want to fall one short of Jack Nicklaus or get 100 career wins, which one do you pick? And he was like, 19. Now, this is before he won the US Open in 2008. This is before the injuries start coming. This was tunnel vision for Tiger Woods, getting to 19. It's obviously not off the table yet, but it's pretty unlikely.
Yeah, it's not totally off the table. He's only 4 short of it. And, he's going to play another 15 Open Championships. He's going to play at the Masters another 15 times at least. And at both those tournaments, you think he's got something of a chance. But it did feel, watching him this year, that stars had aligned from at Augusta last year in terms of his fitness, in terms of the field, whereas now that fitness, you're still watching him again, you're still a little bit nervous every time he's out in the golf course when he's going down to pick up the tee. But yeah, if that injury hadn't happened, if all the off the course stuff hadn't happened, you just got to think he would have got there.
Okay, so it's worth watching on in short?
Yeah, 100%, especially part one. I really enjoyed the relationship with his father and how that was covered.
All right, time for dealing.